Good morning, how are you all doing? Y'all got really quiet. It's like 1 minute to 8, but I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Barbara Bynum. I'm one of the forum facilitators, along with Judy Ann Files and Kathy Keevers and Phoebe Benzinger, who is at jury duty this morning. So like, we can all send her good vibes for a fun jury duty. I look around and I see a lot of familiar faces, and I think some of you probably are like, you could probably give this presentation because you, I know, are very informed about what's going on, but it is so important. We asked Adam Turner with Project 7 to come back and tell us what is going on south of town, because once they start coming out of the ground with their new facility, and you all see an increase to whoever is delivering your water to you, whether that's Tri-County or the City of Montrose, you see an increase in costs, you'll know why and how important it is. So we're glad he's here. If you are new and you haven't been to Forum before, you can easily sign up to get an email every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. that tells you what the program is going to be the following Wednesday morning. You can come, you can not come, it's free. We don't keep a list, although we do kind of count numbers just to make sure we're presenting interesting programs. So on a day with only 8 people here, we would think, oh, we didn't present a very good program. If you ever have ideas for programs, let us know. We are open to ideas and suggestions. We just try and keep topics that are of general interest to the Montrose community and that we think people would want to get up early and come out and hear. And that we can get a speaker for free, because this whole thing is free. There's no cost, we don't pay our speakers. So please don't suggest we have like a world famous author as a speaker. That's not gonna happen. Okay, with that, let's welcome Adam Turner. He is the manager for Project 7. He has been in that role for 32 years, so we are really lucky in our community to have someone with so much expertise. Let's give him a warm welcome and him to go.
Thank you all. I actually haven't been the manager for 32 years. Most of you know Dick Margetts. He was out there for a long time. I started in '91 as a chemist and worked my way up from chemistry into operations and the management in about 2011 when Dick retired. So what we're talking about is the resiliency program. For those, I mean, all of you guys, I think, know this slide, probably like Barbara said, as well as anybody would. Project 7 is a cooperation that is made up of the City of Montrose, City of Delta, Town of Olathe, Tri-County Water, Chipeta Water, and Menoken Water District. The little known fact, Project 7 started out, Town of Ridgeway was going to be involved in that original project. But they, due to time constraints, they couldn't wait, and they wanted to get their package plant going quicker than that, and so they did their own thing. And so we kind of have adopted as a silent 7th partner the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users. They deliver all the raw water to us from the tunnel, and that's part of what this resiliency project is addressing as we go forward. So let's see. So this is kind of the history. This kind of shows the Gunnison Tunnel opened in 1909. That's when all the valley got transformed from just green along the river corridor to a fertile farm ground. And then in 1973, they started to see some treatment capacity issues at all of the separate little entities that City of Montrose had a plant east of town, and they were starting to get shortchanged there. Tri-County was buying the water from the City of Montrose. Chipeta had the wells out south of town. A place called Collins Farms had the wells down there. And so they all started to have these issues. And so in 1977, they started Project 7. And they bought the City of Montrose plant that had been out there since 1934, and they just rehabbed it to be a much bigger plant. They took it from probably a 6 MGD plant to a 21 million gallon a day plant. And so that was able to backstop all the other little water systems, and we had one regional water supply. And it was done for a lot of good reasons, most of which is instead of having seven little plants all around the valley, they decided to have one big plant. And that was pushed by the Farm Home Administration back in the day, was the ones who financed that, and they said, we just won't finance all these little water plants upgrades. We want you all to get your act together and have a regional plant. And so we did that, or that was done in 1980. I was still in high school at the time. And so they did that, and it was a great thing. It worked out really well. And the water was treated very efficiently. Now, one thing to remember is, like the City of Montrose, they own their own water still. They own that water, and Project 7 just treats it. And Project 7 just treats it for a flat fee. We treat the water for City of Montrose and the City of Delta for the same exact price. So it's just something that was done all for efficiency, and it is very efficient. Instead of having 5 water treatment people at each little water plant, we have a staff of 10 that does a 24/7, 365 days a year water plant, and it's staffed continually, day and night, instead of having all these little bitty plants around the valley. Some of this shows, though, as well, in about 2009, we started to think about the 100-year anniversary of the tunnel, and some of us started to lay awake at night thinking, what would happen if something happened to the tunnel? And so we started doing some engineering studies on it. And the good news is we found out that even though it would be a catastrophic event, it's probably, it's a very low probability of anything happening to the tunnel that would stop it completely and not get us the water we need. But in that, we also started to see that there are other things going on. This is basically the treatment, or the service area for the treatment plant that we have right now. I'm sure this has a little laser. Yeah, look at that. So here's the water plant. Like I said, just we're 3 miles east of town on the way out towards Gunnison on Highway 50. All the water comes in from Blue Mesa, originates most of it up in Taylor Park, would come into Blue Mesa and down through the 3 reservoir systems and through the South Canal, and through the Gunnison Tunnel into the South Canal. Oh my word, I'm sorry. So you can see the water comes through. There's about 6 miles of canal. If anybody has ever been in it, the tunnel is absolute straight shot under the wall of the Black Canyon, and takes water out of the Gunnison River and runs it by gravity all the way through till it pops out over here in the adobes and starts into the South Canal. All the water rights so what happens is the Uncompahgre Valley water users take the water from Taylor Park, like we said, up here above Gunnison and near Crested Butte. They take that water and they trade it for the water that the City of Montrose owns here in Silverjack, and that all the entities own some water in Ridgeway. And they trade that water gallon for gallon, and it works out really well for everybody. We take, on average, about 16 CFS, so about 1.5% of the water that's coming through the Gunnison Tunnel is what comes into Fairview and that we treat for everybody to drink and use domestically here in this system. So you can see it's a very big water system, and the thing that we figured out through all these studies, engineering studies, is that even though the South Canal and the Gunnison Tunnel seem like maybe the one single point of failure, it would be catastrophic, it's probably very unlikely. But there are a lot of other things that can go wrong, in a drinking water system in today's climate that we find ourselves in. And some of those things are the drought or wildfire. That's an even bigger issue. We found that some of our neighbors to the south, like say Durango, when they had the Missionary Ridge fire, they found out that they would have had no drinking water the following year if they hadn't had a secondary source. Because as the snow melts on that freshly burned off area the next year, it brings in an incredible amount of mud into their reservoir, and it's very low quality water. And there's not many plants in the state that are designed to take out that kind of sediment and that kind of debris that would come in with a wildfire. And so, you know, as we've all seen up there in the Glenwood Canyon corridor, the risk due to wildfire is probably almost as severe as the risks that we have from drought. All of us have seen, I mean, all of us here in this room saw Blue Mesa last year, which was at the lowest point that it had been since it was filled, back when it was first gone into service back in the 50s, so, or 60s, I'm sorry. And so, you know, we see that drought is a reality that's hanging over our head. What we were looking for is, instead of just shoring up one piece of the system here, all the data told us that having a second plant with a second source of water and a second watershed makes a lot more sense than just trying to shore up one point of failure that also was very unlikely to happen. And so that got us thinking about where we're headed today. So we started off calling it the Ridgeway Water Plant, and for some obvious reasons that doesn't work. It doesn't serve Ridgeway, the town of Ridgeway. And so now we've come up with this new name that's a mouthful, but it's the Resiliency Program. And it's all about trying to shore up a lot of different, I don't want to say points of failure, but things that could go wrong in the water plant that could create problems for all of our customers. These kind of things over here are some of the things that we've spent the last 4 years really building a consensus in the community of what we should do, how we should do it, and where we should do it. And so these are some of the values that came out of it. We want to do it, obviously, as financially efficient as we can. This is a good one that everybody understands how valuable water is today in the West. And just all the coverage we've had on Lake Powell and Lake Mead over the last 2 years, it just was ad nauseum in the news every day about how it could get any lower, all the new things that were being found at the bottoms of the lakes as new areas came into view from ages ago. So not everything that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They found some of the bodies at the bottom of Lake Mead. This is a very high value for Project 7. We're all for one and one for all. For all this time, all 6 entities have worked together really, really well. And it's kind of rare, I'm sure, if any of you are from different areas, there's usually a lot of rivalry between communities that are close by. They're competing for the same new businesses and the same housing and all that stuff. But we've really had a great one for all for one, Three Musketeers kind of motto here. And we want to continue that. And then, we'll just move on. So again, the wildfire and the drought, those became kind of bigger parts of our thinking rather than just trying to fix something that hopefully will never break as it relates to the Gunnison Tunnel. As you can see from this graph, usually we have we go through this a little bit and just say all the biggest fires in the state have happened in the last 20 years. And they're happening more frequently, and they're happening in bigger scales in each one, and you can just see how that's kind of amped up and gotten worse and worse. And so the bottom line here is what we were talking about, that there's all these other things besides just the tunnel failure that could impact drinking water. And so we wanted to address as many of those things as we can with one big project. Along the way, we talked about other ways to just fix this. And there were other options to just pump water from, say, the Uncompahgre back up to the water treatment plant. It's not that far, it can be done. But we'd be investing millions of dollars in doing something that we hope we'd never use, and every time we use it, it would just cost a lot of extra money. And so it was also one of those things where it didn't seem real sustainable. It's not a good use of resources to just have something like that sitting on the shelf. So this kind of shows, this slide and the one following it kind of show the situation that we find ourselves in as a valley. Like I said, having Project 7 serve this whole inhabitable area here in the valley floor was a great concept, and it really paid good dividends back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was good to have one regional plant to do all this work. And the beauty of Project 7 is it's right here, but all the water flows all the way to Delta High School totally by gravity. There's no pumps involved in any of that. But the other side of it is that everything from about Ogden Roads here in Montrose south, that's all that water gets pumped back up valley. And so that takes a lot of energy. Some of the remote areas up here around Ridgeway, down to Little Log Hill here, some of those areas can get pumped as many as 15 times to go back uphill. So part of the thinking was if you treat the water where it is, then this just gives more hydraulic leverage to be able to not pump the water from here all the way back up, but you can actually run it by gravity all the way to the ends of the system from the new water treatment plant. So that's a really big value adder to this project. The one thing that they want to show here is that, and what we did in some of the risk assessment that we did, is that what we don't think about and what we don't broadcast a lot is that just having one main transmission line and one water treatment plant really makes it less resilient for everybody. If we've had a few problems in the past, like I think some of you probably remember when the pipeline got drilled into by an underground contractor over by what used to be Gibson's, but now is Gold's Gym. It shut down water service to the whole valley because they drilled into the bottom of the 36-inch pipe over there, and it was a big deal. It took us about 2 days to get that repaired, and so everybody was on short water rations. What is good about it is that everybody has adequate storage to run off their tanks for 24 hours to 48 hours, no problem, that their customers won't even notice it. But everybody who's managing the systems and at the treatment plant, we're all getting pretty nervous from the minute that call comes in that there's water coming up in the street. And so a lot of times we have to get all the breaks repaired as quick as possible to keep people into service. There's no workarounds when you only have one water treatment plant and one main transmission line. So what we do for just the way to enlighten people is, you can contrast this to what they have in the Grand Valley, and the Grand Valley has 4 different water plants in just the Grand Valley. So they have one at Grand Junction that basically treats Colorado River water. They have the Ute Water Conservancy District. It's out here right on the edge of the mountain. They have Clifton, has its own water plant that's kind of a work of art and a modern marvel. They pull water out of the Colorado River. Sometimes it's so turbid, it's like 10,000 NTUs, which is about the consistency of latex paint. That's how real it is. And they pull that water in, and they suck out the good water, and they can put their waste stream back into the water, into the river, and it's still better quality than what is in the rest of the body of water. So, but that's a one-off. Nobody else can get that kind of a sweetheart deal, because that's really something. And the town of Palisade has another water treatment plant up here just for their town. And so they all have interconnections, and I mean, probably most of you can remember back in the day they've had some issues down in the Grand Valley, and you know, like Grand Junction had a boil water order at one point, and you was able to open some connections and get them back into drinking water without too many hassles before too many people got up in arms. And so what we're looking to do is have something that's more like this, and not one cup with one straw and one way to get our water to all the people that live here in the valley. So this is just more of those kind of bullet points. We realized that we inherited a really good system that has worked really well, and it really is a credit to our forefathers. Everybody was able to take a bite out of their ego and work together and create a regional system that was really a good value for all of us. And we want to invest in the future in a way that, you know, my grandkids and your grandkids can still live here and have plenty of water, and it's affordable to live here. So this is what we're talking about doing. This is like an aerial map. The original concept when they built Ridgeway Reservoir was to put a water treatment plant right here in the corner where Tri-County has a little field house. That was the original water treatment plant site. Because we didn't get around to jumping on that and starting that plant back in the 70s, that footprint's gotten smaller and smaller. So right now, you know, CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they've kind of taken over that area that was right here that was designed for the water plant. And they use it for long-term storage and for some of their seasonal workers who live there they're gonna make them a little campground. And then there's also a huge transmission yard there where they get the hydropower and can put it on the transmission lines. There, I believe that's a tri-state facility. And so they've done all that, and so to build a water plant in that little corner of the dam became unfeasible, something we couldn't really pull off. The other thing that we figured out over time of sampling the water out of Ridgeway Reservoir quite a bit is that it's quite a bit harder than the water people are used to here. The water that we get out of Blue Mesa is very it's very good quality, very high quality water. It picks up a little bit of hardness as it comes through the Gunnison Tunnel. There's some underground springs under the Black Canyon that influence that water, and so it can come up as high as 120 milligrams per liter of hardness, and it does that routinely in the wintertime. So if you lived here long enough, you know that in the summertime we usually have water that's about 80 milligrams per liter hardness, and in the wintertime it goes up to about 120 milligrams per liter. Back in the day, funny side story, when they built the hydro system, when Uncompahgre Valley water users put in their hydro units on the South Canal, we went one whole winter where we just had to take water straight out of the tunnel. Our normal way of doing it is we get refilled in Fairview Reservoir every 2 weeks from the Gunnison Tunnel. They open it just a crack at the bottom. They send us about 100 to 120 CFS, and we fill Fairview Reservoir up. All through from October 31st all the way to March 31st, that's pretty much the way we get refilled. What the water users can do is that 100 CFS that comes through the tunnel, they flush the first bunch that comes out down the AB lateral, And so they can keep our hardness down to about 120. If we don't waste that little bit of water that comes through out of the tunnel, it can boost our hardness at the existing plant up to about 160. And so for that whole winter of '08, where they were building those South Canal hydros, the hardness got up to about 160, and everybody noticed it. We were getting calls all the time. People were like, "What's wrong? What's changed with the water? My dishes don't come clean. They look scuzzy." We had one lady show up with a whole dishpan of dishes to prove to us that our water was acting with her dishes. And you know, it was different, and people get used to what they like. And so this water down in Ridgeway comes out of the reservoir at about 300 to 360 parts per million hardness. Now, hardness isn't bad for you. It's not something that's negative from a health issue, but we know from an aesthetic issue and from past experience that all these residents from, you know, Ogden Road South who might experience this water are already accustomed to a water about 120 at the max. And so if we just open the spigot and they started getting 360, they would not be happy. And so part of this new water treatment process we feel has to include a way to soften it to be real similar to what we have coming out of Blue Mesa. The other thing from a standpoint of just the realities of mixing waters in distribution systems, it's much easier if they're similar water qualities, and you don't have to only have, you know, a harder water in one side of the system. It would really help our resiliency if the water can go anywhere in the system without, you know, having large chunks of hardness come out and plug everybody's different appurtenances in their house, their filters and stuff. So part of the thing is to put a new water treatment plant in. Originally we bought a site here just down valley called Spud Hill, and originally we were planning to put the water plant there, but we really kind of ran out of, it was an 8-acre site there, and it really wasn't enough space there either. So fortunately we found a ranch that was for sale down here right outside of the canyon, and this has this little plateau up behind it is the perfect site so that we can still get water from the dam to the site totally by gravity, and by gravity we can feed it all the way south to Delta if we have to, and it can still come up here to the last pumping stations that would still be required to take the water south towards. Tri-County actually serves water just almost the outskirts of Ouray, up there, Weber's trailer park, campground, whatever that is, gets water from Tri-County. So we do go quite a ways further south. And then what you see, the green line and the blue line would be new parts. This would be all new transmission line from the reservoir to the water plant. And this blue line would be new transmission line taken from the treated water site up to, basically it would be coming up in here somewhere to hook into a 14 or a 16-inch pipe that Tri-County has already existing in the ground. So as far as the hardness, the treating of the hardness in the water, that, if any of you have experience from the Midwest where they soften water, that can have a very large footprint. The traditional way of doing it is to put in a lot of chemicals, and you create a lot of hardness that just comes out of the water and becomes a lot of sludge that you have to deal with. And so typically the conventional way of doing it is you bring the pH way low and have all this this hardness chunk out of the water, and then you have to use like a belt press or something to consolidate it so you're not hauling a lot of water off site, and then you have to take it to a landfill. And it takes a lot of space and a lot of energy and a lot of equipment. So we we were shown a different technology that is kind of promising. It's used extensively all over Europe, but not a lot of it's being used in the US yet. And so the Bureau of Rec actually gave us a pretty good grant to do a pilot test. And we actually set up 2 of those units here at the Ridgeway Dam and ran that all last summer. We had 3 techs that were involved in it, and we ran that thing for about 3 months down there to just get a good feel for whether this thing is called a pellet softener reactor. And so instead of making tons of hardness sludge that you have to dewater and haul off, this process is a very selective process where you drop grains of pretty small sand into these reactors, and then you mess with the pH, drop it down, so you take the calcium hardness and coat those little grains of sand that are like a lot like forming a pearl in an oyster. Just take that little irritation, and then that calcium builds up around it to a size that ultimately can fall out pretty quickly and dewater it very easily, and basically put it in a large dumpster with holes drilled in the bottom, and you just can haul them off site, but you're only taking out the calcium hardness. And so that's the real benefit of this. Instead of dropping out tons of all this mud that you have to deal with, you're just selectively taking out the calcium hardness. The other good part of that is that it ends up with a product that doesn't have to go to the landfill. There are beneficial uses for it as well. So you can take those pellets and you can add them to like a dairy cow feed, and it would have a good source of calcium. Or you could take it to one of these chicken farms where they're laying eggs, and it could harden their shells of their eggs, and so it could just replace some of those natural, like oyster shell kind of additives that they would give to a chicken farm. And so this kind of was a win-win kind of a thing. You can see the Bureau of Rec is really hoping it works. That's why they want, they gave us so much money to test this product and this process. These are what the units look like on a tiny scale. We went over and looked. There's some in Commerce City where they have I think 4 of them in use right now that they put in to soften their water, and theirs have worked out very well over there on the Front Range. So this would be the first on a surface water plant. There are some in the states that are working on groundwater as we speak. So this would just kind of be branching it out into a new area. This is the ranch that we were fortunate to buy. If you're headed south, let's see, like Billy Creek would be coming off about right in this area. So right before Billy Creek, there's then down here Centennial Ranch. This is part of Centennial Ranch property here, and we own this ranch here. The plan is at this point is this bench up on the top behind that existing shop is a perfect hydraulic gradient to get water from the Ridgeway Dam all the way to this site without having to pump it. It can all come in by gravity, and we could actually produce some hydropower in the future when the plant grows to a size where that would be feasible. And then from here, it can actually run by gravity all the way down to Delta High School if it has to. So that's a real benefit to this site. What the plan is at this point, I think there's about 15 acres up here on this bench, and that goes up on the side of the hill. And our plan is to put the water treatment plant all up here, and then eventually to lop off the ranch and keep this ranch as a working ranch down in the bottom to kind of preserve that corridor and the the values that are down there in the valley floor, and then just keep the water plant up behind there on the hill. Water plants like to be out of sight and out of mind. We don't generate a lot of visibility usually. So this is kind of a artist rendering of what that could look like. This is actually a much bigger plant than what we're talking about building. This is probably a 40 million gallon a day plant. We're talking about putting in a plant that would do 6 million gallons a day in the near term, and up to like 12 million gallons a day in the long-term outlook. And the reason we do that is because that's a little more water than what we need on any given day in the wintertime. So we feel like that's like a base flow that we would like to target to have a real resiliency. And that's where we come back to that. Resiliency is what we're really pushing here. It's not about new capacity. It's not about new anything aimed at growth. This is all really about trying to make sure that we always have water to get to every one of our customers on any given day. And so you can see we're trying to preserve the ranch land down here at the bottom and just kind of take over this knoll up here that is the perfect hydraulic gradient. This would kind of be a concept from the highway view, just showing how we've already been talking to Uray County, and they're very sensitive about any buildings sticking up above the ridge. They have a lot of strong feeling about lighting this place up and creating a problem for the people who want to enjoy the stars. And so this would be, again, this is a very big plant. This is probably a lot bigger than what we will ever get to. This is an existing shop that's there now. There would be, just the different buildings that would do the softening of the water and the different chemical things we have to do, and then a little bit of storage, and then the water would be ready to head down valley. So they just have different conceptual ideas of how that would look. So this is the timeline when this all happens. We've been, like I said, planning and trying to get all our ducks in the row for the last 3 or 4 years. Now we're, tomorrow we're in June, so we're about halfway through 2023, and we're in a good spot as far as the design work on the plant. We've got a lot of the concepts are put together, and they're really getting close to being ready to apply to like CDPHE, that's Colorado Public Health and Environmental. That's who oversees all new water plants, and so we have to give our plans to them, and so that they can at 30%, and then that's where they give you the go ahead, and then you can begin construction at some time after they've approved of your plans. So right now, we have hired a design and construction team. We're looking to do this as a progressive design build, so that they are already designing it, and before we actually get it sent off to the state to get approval, and then they'll be able to start construction even before it's all fully designed. And that's this overlap here comes from that progressive design build format that we're hoping to utilize here. We brought on the contractors, McCarthy and CDM Smith, and that's who's doing our design work, and we'll do the construction eventually. We also have, you can see down here, Garver. This is, they are our owner's advisors. So, we're a small water plant with 10 staff, and so we really didn't have the resources to do all this, all the outreach, all the financial pieces where you go out and look for money under every tree and shake every bush and try to find all the grants and loans. So we've hired them, and they've been working hand in hand with us for all this period of the planning and the early permitting stage. So a lot of this, this is the stuff that usually in crowds like this gets all the attention. How do we pay for all this? And so when we started, there was a lot of federal and state monies out there available. Since we've gotten engaged in this process, it's become even better. We've actually secured, I guess I would say that we're like 99% sure we can get it all financed through a combination of the SRF, which is the state level of funding for projects like this. And there's a newer program that's just started called the WIFIA, and that's like water infrastructure finance plan from the federal government. And so we'll work together with those two programs and be able to finance this for the future. We also are a strong candidate for a lot of the grants. So a lot of this stuff is good. We are in the pipeline to apply for up to a $25 million grant from the Bureau of Reclamation. And that's Title 16 grant. And our pilot program and how badly they want to come up with a new technology to soften the water without adding salinity back into the river makes us a really strong candidate for that particular grant. And then obviously inflation. When we started talking about this, we hadn't really experienced 2021 and 22. Like our chemical costs went through the roof, just like everybody else noticed when they went to the supermarket or anywhere else. Inflation really ate our lunch the last couple of years. So, we needed some of the upticks in the rates just to match what we have to use to pay the bills. But we're also trying to stockpile some money so that we can apply for some of these loans and grants, and it all takes a local match for all those funds. Again, we want to keep the rates as low as possible, but we really want to reinvest in this water system so the next 40 years are as strong as the past 40, and that's kind of our bottom line. These are other talking points that we've gotten from. We've gone around and addressed, all the city councils, all the water districts, and we've talked one-on-one with all the constituents that we serve, and these are a lot of their feedback that they that this is how they see the things. Whoops. Like this one right here is probably one of our best. 20 years from now, this whole rate increases and stuff will be a bump in the road. But if we ran out of water and people have to deal with a short-term or long-term water outage, that would change the inflection point here in the valley forever. And so we really don't want to be in that boat. Again, we really can't say it enough. The people who set up and worked together to start Project 7, that was a huge idea and a really good investment for the future. And we want to do the same and set up our kids and grandkids to have that same kind of success going forward. With that, I think there's ways that you can get involved. There's going to be more. Last summer we had an event down at the ranch there this side of Ridgeway. We're going to have another community town hall this summer, and it'll probably be on site at the new treatment facility. Then we also say you can schedule a tour to look at the existing facility or visit the new site and kind of get a feel for that. We update our website pretty regularly with all the different, at the different points as we go along in the process. And then you can contact us directly if you have a question at project7@montrose.net, and we typically can get back to you pretty quickly with anything there. So with that, I can open up for questions.
Perfect. I will pass the mic around. That was
Two questions. How do you get the water from Ridgeway Reservoir to the new plant? Tunnel, canal? And the second question, part of the first, is who's going to hate this? and make permitting take till 2100?
Well, those are good questions. What we have, and you can see it on one of those, the plan is to have a pipeline go from the facility at Ridgeway, and there's already, Tri-County has installed an outlet on the penstock for the hydros, so we can hook onto the water right there at the reservoir, and then bring it through probably a 24-inch pipeline all the way down to the water plant, and that's all pushed by gravity. This is a little bit misleading. This was one of the concepts. CPWs did not like this concept. It went right through the campground, and they didn't like that. So I mean, we're coming up the highway here. We cross Cow Creek right there, and we come up, and then we do a little jog there, and then all the way up. So far, we haven't found anybody who doesn't like the project. Everybody, you know, it kind of resonates with everybody to have everybody having water rights in this reservoir. That was a huge part of it. If the cities and districts didn't have water rights already in there, then people would see it as a speculative move. But because they already owned it and they just want to treat the water they already own, everybody's been very cooperative to this point. With that said, you know, you don't know what you don't know.
Having served on the board before, at that time, there were 5 members of the board. What is the current makeup of the Project 7 board?
Yeah, nowadays there's 6. There's 6 directors, a director from each one of the entities that we serve. And so the 6 people make all the decisions.
And the City of Montrose rep is David Reese, our utilities manager. Are any of the other board members from any of the other? Hi, sir, I don't know you.
That's Randy Meeker from Menoken Water District.
Thanks for being here.
I'm on Chipeta's board.
Hang on, we got a question right here, and then I'll bring you the mic.
Okay. You're on Chipeta's board. Thank you. And Jim
I'm
Burke?
sorry. That was another board member.
This is another board member from Chipeta, but he's not on our board. He's just on the Chipeta Water Board. And then Jim Berger used to be on the City of Delta. He used to be their rep from the City of Delta.
Fantastic. And I think it's important to know that those entities are the ones making the decision, not someone appointed by Denver to decide this. But these are our local water districts and our local water providers that are making these decisions for us.
Hi, as someone from the Midwest, I appreciate your concern for hard water. We had to get a water softener. We lived up and got water from Stagecoach State Reservoir outside of Steamboat Springs. And without it being treated, you washed your clothes and your clothes wore out twice as fast until we got a water softener, among other things. And dishes, I have to agree with the lady about dishes. Anyway, you made the comment, this new way of softening water, you had to lower the pH. Does the pH, then do you do something to raise the pH back up again? And what is the pH of our water?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've fought for the last 30 years with the water out of Blue Mesa is it's almost neutral, and so 7.2 is what we normally see coming out of the water treatment plant. 7 being neutral, and the scale goes from 0 to 14. And so it's just slightly on the acidic side. The good side of that is that we've done a lot of, for any homeowners that have opened up their doors to us, we've done a lead copper program over the last 25 years that really showed the federal government was really interested to make sure that we weren't, that our water wasn't causing corrosion of people's inside plumbing. And so our water has never been a corrosive water, even though 7.2 is a little bit acidic. The new water would be closer to an 8. And so we'll probably have to adjust all the water to 8, which will make everybody in the state much happier because that'll make our water that less corrosive. I don't think anybody will notice it drinking it, but it's better for the water to be a little bit closer to 7.5, 8 than it is to be 7 and down in that area. So, yeah.
Once this plant is operational, will it be used emergency only or combined with the other water supply?
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of our acid reflux over all this throughout time has been when you build something and you don't use it, it tends to just kind of molder away. And so we really want to have a plant that's part of the everyday working environment and then can be ramped up to fit those emergencies. But we want to keep it working all the time. And so this plant is going to be designed to do probably about 2 million gallons a day. And so it'll serve all that area. I think we had a better map before. I hope I don't make anybody sick to their stomach. But like I said, all this area is basically south of Ogden Road here in Montrose. All this area is the pumped area that Tri-County serves. Our plan is to have 2 MGD coming out of this that would do all this brick red area plus a little bit of the City of Montrose every day. So that's another reason why we want that water quality to be very compatible with each other. And we've already talked to the state about it, and they're excited about it being less corrosive, and that it would be an add for all of us going forward to have this blended water. I didn't answer your question completely. One of the things that we do is they drop the pH, or they get it, they actually go up with it. They make it more basic, and then we can chunk out all that calcium carbonate, and then we'll add CO2. And the CO2 is a very weak acid that will bring the pH back to where it's supposed to be. So we have to adjust that pH, and we'll get it to be just perfectly compatible with everything going forward.
I'm going to come over to Kathy and then I'll come back over here. So fascinating, just when you turn on your tap, to think of everything that goes into it.
There's rumors circulating around town that originally when you were looking at doing this, the cost was here and that the cost has just skyrocketed. Is that correct? And if so, why?
That's a good question, and part of it is, we've been talking about this for so long. When we originally started talking about it, we were talking like a $40 million project, and then, as you get into the details more, then it becomes apparent, it's going to be twice that expensive. And so the price does keep going up. If any of you have been to Grand Junction Pipe or anything like that recently, or Home Depot and tried to buy pipe, pipe material went through the roof. And so that was a very big add. You can see a lot of this project is pipeline, and pipe material is still very expensive. And so that's one of the reasons. The other thing is, just the world we live in today, prices keep going up, and not many of them turn back down when they become more available. So prices just keep going up. We're very committed to keeping it as low as possible, but that being said, the longer we wait, the bigger the price continues to get. So we're all of our invested people are saying, let's get it done now and not, we were gonna do this back 30 years ago when they built Ridgeway Reservoir. That could have been done for nickels on the dollar today. I wish we'd have done it, but the money was just as hard to pull out of people's wallets at that day as it is now. But there is also a lot of public grants and monies out there. There's a lot of assistance right now that we're really hoping to get into. If we get a $25 million grant, that will really help the project along.
Adam, part of that last question, you might tell them a little bit of the process of going through the alluvial wells versus the river takeout and why each one of them has progressed in expense.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. As we looked at some of these pictures and talked about what we had proposed, this pipeline right here from Ridgeway Reservoir down to the treatment plant site is a huge investment. But the reason that it's important to us, the other way to get water there would be to just release it from the dam, have it run down the natural river corridor, and then put a pump station in the river about here. That would be about half the cost of this pipe, of what the pipeline is. The issues that we were looking at there is saying, and Mr. Meeker's point is, at that point, we can either pump it directly out of the river and through a straining process and just pump it up up the driveway there. Or we could, we actually did some tests to see if we could just drill alluvial wells out there in the alfalfa fields that we own and just gather the water and let the natural geology do some of the work for us and just pump it into the water plant. When we looked at that, the alluvial wells, there just wasn't a big enough depth. We would have had to drill too many wells, and that would have been quite a lot of things to maintain. And the pump station, the major downfall of that is the water quality. We all know that Cow Creek comes in right here, and it's very flashy. It brings in a lot of sediment in the spring, and then anytime there's a big rain event up here in the fall, it can still change the turbidity of the water, tenfold. And so between that and some other things, having the water come directly out of Ridgeway Reservoir is a real big value. It's much more stable, it's much more consistent, and there's really not as many day-to-day things that can go wrong with it there. So the board looked at all that and decided that the value difference between having a pump station, which also would depend on electrical power all the time. So, again, it's that efficiency. If we put it in a pipeline and bring it down here, we could actually produce power, some hydropower that we can put back on the system, as opposed to if we let the water run down the river and pump it up here, it's always something, it's an ongoing cost that we have day in, day out. So that all kind of adds into the mix. And so there's ways we could, try to cut costs, but at the end of the day, we're also looking to make sure that we're having the best value that we can get and the most resiliency and the most long-term, good use of resources.
Thank you. We're out of time. There's more questions. I bet you could stay for a few minutes and talk to folks. I do know the police academy will be coming in shortly, but let's give Adam a big round of applause.